Hello, and welcome to the Tried It podcast, your proven pathway to a better copywriting business. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Nicole. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks.
So this is the first episode where we're going to be looking at this book. So what we're going to do today is discuss our takeaways from the book, things that we like, things we didn't like, what advice we're taking from it. And at the end of the episode, we will decide our implementation points, which are the things that we will apply to our own work, to our client work, and to the way we run our businesses in general. And we will see what we learn from those when we discuss them in the next episode. Before we get started, Nicole, I think we should just mention that it's really important for our listeners that they buy and read this book for themselves. What do you think?
100%, definitely. Like as wonderful and as intelligent and as, amazing as our podcast episode is, we always recommend that you buy the books and read them.
Yes, the podcast episode isn't a substitute for buying the book, and we're really grateful to authors who put their hard work out into the universe. So we recommend that you buy it too, because you might have other takeaways from us. There might be points that you pick up that we didn't find, or that are more relevant to you than they are to us. So I've dropped links to buy the book in the show notes. You can get it anywhere online, all reputable bookstores, etc., etc. So with that said, I think that we can start to get into 4,000 Weeks.
Yeah, so it's quite a book. I'm going to kick us off with a bit of an intro, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
It's an unconventional take to time management, which is in some senses quite refreshing, because one of his takeaways is that we should stop trying to control time. And this is coming from someone, I think some context is important. Two things. It was written during the pandemic, number one. And number two, Oliver Burkeman is a journalist, but he was also obsessed with productivity. So he's one of these people who did everything to try and control time. And his findings are kind of philosophical, eye-opening, and rather refreshing, I think.
Yes, I think I never came across him before this book, but I think he used to have a column with, I could be making this up here, but I think it was the New York Times, talking about what you might call time hacks, different kinds of methods to get more out of your day. And I think that we could put all of these time hacks, productivity hacks that he used to do in the category of traditional time management, where you're just trying to squeeze more worth from every single day. And this book, 4,000 Weeks, is pretty much the opposite of that.
Right.
It's not really about doing less, but it's a very different way of looking at using your mortal hours.
But you know what I really liked, which is so true and so obvious, is that it's true. Like when you become super efficient or super productive, which he touches on, you end up doing more, right? And so he's not saying necessarily do less, but do more of what matters, because his whole theory is we can't do everything. Like try as you might, there is no way you're going to be able to do everything. So accept that, focus on the things that matter, and make peace with it. Stop trying to be super efficient.
Yes, I think he argues that approach of shoving more things in the day, by doing that, you're stopping this process of evaluating whether these things are really worth your effort to do, and you're just in this kind of execution mode, which I thought is interesting from the perspective of somebody who, for us as business owners, because it can be quite easy to get into that way of thinking.
Right.
I would say you mentioned, Nicole, and this is very true. I would say it's one of the really, the hallmarks of the book is that Berkman's approach is very philosophical. So just taking a second to unpack the title, 4,000 Weeks corresponds more or less to 80 years, which is the average human lifespan. And everything he talks about is set against this context of you will die. And yeah, it's quite a when I was reading it, obviously I'm not new to the idea of the fact that I'll die, but you do have to. It took me a while to really read it because he throws some big, heavy thoughts out there, which I had to take a second to really sit with and process. And I think that in the school of traditional time management, as you say, it's really just about get this done, move on to the next thing. And this book is a manifesto against that, really. It's about quality of life, I suppose, and how you take meaning from the things that you do with your life.
I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. And I'm going to share a little secret with our listeners. This is actually a re-recording. Yes, we recorded. We weren't happy and we re-recorded. And I'm sharing this for two reasons. One, because we're big on transparency. But also because it builds on what Sarah said, that I actually found it a very valuable experience. Like, because I went back and I reviewed some of my notes and I thought about the book more. And it's kind of like what Sarah said, that there are bigger philosophical concepts that you really have to break down. And so I would say to anybody reading this, like, give yourself time. It may be an easy read, but it's not it's a thinker,
Yes, you're right. It's quite, I would say the thoughts aren't necessarily complex. You don't have to really work to pick it apart. It just requires some deep thinking. In a way, it was an interesting book for me to read because it's not, in terms of time management for business owners, for copywriters, it's not a sort of direct do A and you will get results B and C. It's more about thinking of your overall philosophy, really. So it takes some digestion. So I would say if you're reading it, give yourself that time to think about it more. For example, one of his philosophical ideas that was a real sort of, I was reading it in a little local cafe here. It was a real sort of, I've got to put down my mug and just stare off into space while I think my way through this. He talks about the fact that you don't have time, you are time.
Right.
Right. Which is not his idea. He's quoting from the philosopher Heidegger. But essentially, time is the way that you move through your life. And when we talk about having time, do I have enough time to do this and so on? We're really treating time as kind of a resource, as you would with other natural resources like, I don't know, gold or rubber or whatever. But time just isn't like that. And one of the other things is you'll only ever know if you have enough time after that time has passed. So we are stuck in the present, moving forwards, trying to make judgments with incomplete, imperfect knowledge as incomplete, imperfect people.
Right. And he also talks about how, as much as you don't have time, you are time. It's also the fact that it's not like a resource like money, where ideally you'd want to earn more money. He talks about how having unlimited time is actually not necessarily a good thing. There's one part of the book where he talks about, I think, a skipper or somebody who works on a ship, and he has unlimited freedom. And he talks about how that isn't necessarily a good or enough to make one happy, because he's probably, alone a lot. He's separated from other people. Like, his schedule doesn't sync with other people. And there's something about having time that has meaning and that is used in a way that brings you happiness and that is meaningful for you, that is also eye-opening. Which I think makes sense also in the context of, it was written, again, schedules being disrupted in the light of COVID, things like that. People moving to working from home, those kind of things. So it's kind of changing how we see time and how we use time. So those are all very, I think, eye-opening concepts.
I think so. Yes, it's really, for me, the context of the book and of his life really, it did stick with me. I think he has a nice sort of non-judgmental approach to how you use your time, which I found quite touching, really, that it wasn't about trying to do things that have, a sort of global impact, because, realistically, how many of us are going to change the world? It's more about, the things that feel meaningful to you, whether that's, painting miniature figurines or feeding stray cats, or I don't know, turning towels into pillowcases or something like that. As long as it is special or significant to you, just by dedicating yourself to that, you will make the world a better place, because you're turning yourself into kind of a guiding light for other people.
Right. Which also kind of raises the question of whether this book is kind of practical. Like I came to this book hoping that this is going to unlock and solve all my issues with time, my inability to manage time. And it's not that. Even though, as you say, he is non-judgmental and he does give you permission. He even advocates for procrastination in some ways. He advocates for a kind of healthy, useful procrastination. He talks a lot about procrastination. He talks about different types of procrastination. And I felt that the section on procrastination was almost like permission to kind of procrastinate playfully, or procrastinate in a way that you're focusing on the things that matter and you're kind of ignoring the rest. And so that's also empowering and a different way of framing it, as opposed to getting everything done and being productive all the time. Like, no, we're slowing down, we're focusing on what matters in life, which is refreshing, I think.
It is, because normally it's certainly in the school of sort of traditional time management, procrastination is just the worst thing that you could possibly do. Because it implies that you're doing something else instead of doing something that's important. But yeah, he talks about how, or the thing that stuck with me when he was talking about procrastination was his concept of manipulating the present moment.
Right.
That essentially that traditional time management is just a foil for your anxiety about life, about the fact that you're a person with a limited control over what happens in the future. And so you try and grasp control over other areas, and all of these feelings become a kind of barrier between you and reality. And reality is that you're stuck in this moment going forward. And that was an interesting way for me to think about procrastination. I don't know, maybe you could call it a reaction against the fact that you don't like what's going on, that you're trying to change your lived experience in some way. So rather than sending that email, you are, certainly in my case, playing bloody solitaire on your phone or something like that.
He also, on this topic, he talked about an architect in ancient Persia who designed this amazing mosque. And everybody, looked at the plans for the mosque and they were blown away. And this was the most amazing mosque they'd ever seen. And he actually ended up burning the plans for the mosque because he realized he would never be able to build it the way he'd envisioned it. And more than that, like the idea of controlling the future. What would happen to the maintenance? What would happen if parts of the structure were destroyed? And he realized he would never be able to have this perfect vision or control it. And so he ruined it. And like that links to this idea of procrastination, which I thought was very eye-opening.
Yes, I think because he definitely advocates for what you might call just doing the thing, the Nike approach.
Right.
And that by bringing it into the world, even in an imperfect form, it's better than never having interpreted it before, which I think is a nice little slap on the wrist for all of the perfectionists out there, including me.
Yeah, for all of us. It actually, like, I kind of try to think how this book is different to other books I've read. So there's a book by Matthew Dix called Someday is Today. And he also touches on this idea of, just do the thing. There is no perfect. You're never going to get there. I kind of think, though, that this book brings that idea, but then also other things to the table. It brings, like, he has these wonderful ideas. Like, he talks about the art of creative neglect, which is linked to kind of the idea of also procrastination and how to procrastinate. And he has like three steps. So he talks about, first of all, paying yourself first, which comes from the world of finance. And the idea basically is that, if there's something you want to do, you want to write the book, you want to, the screenplay, whatever it is, you do that first. And I'm guilty of this. I want to write a book and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do my client work first. I'm going to build my website. I'm going to land the clients. And then in the spare time I have, I'll work on the book. So he said, no, you've got to do that first. The other one is to limit work in progress. So I think he talks about 3 works in progress at a time, which is also like something that he talks about, and he references Elizabeth Gilbert when she says that it's not about saying yes to things, it's about also learning to say no to things you want to do, which was also for me like a slap on the wrist, because I'm always saying yes to new projects. And then the other thing was resisting the allure of middling priorities.
Yes. Yeah, that's quite an eye-opening one as well.
Yeah, you want to talk more about that?
Yes, he references I don't know if it's Warren Buffett or somebody in that league, who is it that he's being flown on a private plane somewhere, and the pilot is like, well, now's my chance. I'm never going to get hours alone with this guy ever again, so let's go for it, and ask, how do you get all the things done? How do you achieve everything? And Warren starts out by saying, that you designate what your priorities are in your life. It could be career, family, investment portfolio. I'm inventing Warren Buffett's life for him. And you put them in a numbered list. And I think he says something like, when you get, so you have your top 5 priorities, and then you've got priorities, say 6 to 10. And I think that the pilot is expecting to hear that you obviously give the lion's share of your time to 1 to 5, and you fit 6 to 10 in later or something like that. But Warren says, 6 to 10, you just cross out, you let go of, because they're not they're not your top priorities, but neither are they so small that you can just kind of cram them in around the edges. They take up an inconvenient amount of time. So by trying to accommodate your top and your middling priorities, these will inevitably come into contact. So it's top priority or nothing, baby.
Which sounds harsh, right? But it's also liberating in a sense. Like if you think of your life's goal or what you're trying to achieve in your life, that's very liberating, no? I don't know. I think so.
It is. Yeah. It's also, if you're some kind of people pleaser, something like that, it's very easy to take on commitments that you don't necessarily want to do, but you feel some sort of social obligation to do it. And the more you wade in there, and things start to take up more and more time, and if you have some degree of success at it, people just give you more work like that to do, and suddenly you're using the precious amount of your 4,000 weeks just, I don't know, kind of messing around
Right.
with these things that you don't ultimately care about that much.
Yeah. There's a nice section like related to that where he talks about kind of settling, or like, I think I may be mixing sections, but settling and also like deciding, and how there's something empowering about, if I choose to do something, I'm saying no to something else, but that's a decision. So like, let's say I decide, I don't know, like to be a freelancer, and so that enables me, let's say, to pick up my kids from school. That's maybe saying no to career growth in one direction for me, and maybe less income, maybe. But I've made the choice, and like it's like me taking control.
He has some quite stringent lessons on commitment, which show up in different places throughout the book, which is, I think, what you were touching on. Because for all that he advocates procrastinating on, for example, specific tasks in some ways, he's really big into committing to certain things. For example, committing to a place to live, a community of people around you, committing to a partner, to a family. And he puts it in terms of the joy of missing out. So not this kind of FOMO approach of,
right,
well, I think I'll make 3 separate plans for Saturday night, and as long as I can hop across town fast enough, I can do all of them. It's you commit to one thing. There is no fear of missing out on the other plans that you've said no to. It's that you invest in these specific, people, experiences, and so on, because when you're investing in it consciously, it brings greater riches back to you. Because again, you would never be able to do all the experiences that you want to do in life. The more experiences you do, the more experiences you want to do, and then that gives you this feeling of dissatisfaction. Whereas if you sort of plow your furrow in one direction, you're going to hit a kind of depth and richness there that would have never been possible had you been keeping all of these plates in the air at once.
Which again, like, I think it's empowering, I think it's liberating, but like, he does have a section which reads about like dating advice, which I was like, this is not your domain.
It's weird. Yeah. I'm glad you said it, because I wanted to, I was thinking, how can I shoehorn in the fact that I just found this a little bit weird?
I thought it was super weird. I was like, this is a time management book, and I'm sure it sounds like he's married and he has a kid, but like, dude, sorry, no.
I think it's nice advice, and if you're talking to somebody who's, for example, dating around a lot and who is experiencing anxiety about that, like, oh, well, I've been on 3 dates with this girl over here and she seems quite nice, but she's got a weird laugh, so I could go back on the app and find somebody with her qualities without the weird laugh. And his advice in that scenario, I think, is quite nice and quite applicable. But I don't think that anybody goes to 4,000 weeks to think, oh, how do I run my dating life? It felt a bit out of place. And that's where I felt like he was a bit judgmental, because he also, for at some point, had a pop at digital nomads. And
right.
Would I be a digital nomad myself? Probably not, because I'm terrible at packing. I can't pack. But do I judge other people for doing it? No, I think it's a cool experience if you can. But he's so, commit to the place and the person.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's a bit like, sit down, granddad.
Exactly. And like, honestly, like, I don't want to sound crazy, but I don't think relationships are a place where you tell people to settle. And like, I understand the theory. I understand, like he's saying, as you said, the riches come from it. And like, you won't be able to experience a fulfilling relationship or marriage or whatever if you don't commit. But I feel like settling in a relationship was just, for me, like a red flag. I didn't like that.
I think we're coming on to the part that I felt like was a flaw of the book. So maybe I'll bring that up now before we get on to his sort of more concrete advice, because I'm sorry, Oliver, I can't let this go. That for me, and please do correct me if you feel any other way about it, Nicole, it really reads, if you read the book between the lines, it feels quite autobiographical, but he doesn't necessarily say that it is. He gives hints and stuff. He gives a bit of context about his life, for example, of his previous role writing these kind of productivity columns for a newspaper, and knowing what freelancer life is like. I can picture that, that you're working to deadlines, you're also having to pitch a lot of work to different places, like pressure. It's quite high pressured, and you're trying to maximize your opportunities, so you're firing things off left, right, and center. So that was his before state, and he's now clearly either married or in a long-term committed relationship, and he has a kid, and he raised a young child during the pandemic. And this book feels like a big psychological reaction to that change, from this single guy about town lifestyle to suddenly being put into a very different life, especially during that special time of the COVID pandemic. And it feels like he's trying to work out for himself how to deal with that.
Yeah. No, I think you nailed it. I really think you nailed it. Like, I think it's like it's not a midlife crisis, but it's like a mid-pandemic life freak out. Like it is like a bit like a diary entry at some point. Like not really, but he is trying to process and make sense of what's happening in his life. Not to say that it isn't relatable to other people's lives or that we can't learn from it, and not that you shouldn't read the book. I do think it's a good book, but I think you nailed it, Sarah. I think you touched on something very important.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing. And I think that whatever kind of pandemic we all experienced, I don't think that there was anybody that could say, oh, my life just went on totally as before. So I think that his lessons can be applied to many other people. It's just that because he didn't say that, it didn't feel very honest. Or he says it again in bits and pieces. You have these feelings coming through about it where you can kind of think, wow, this guy's kind of been through something. It would just be more honest if he said it that way. And I think it would also perhaps be more useful to people if he gave a bit more of his own life as a guide. I felt in a way that that's what the book was missing, because he does give some concrete time management advice, which we're going to discuss as well. But it would be nice almost to have a kind of, here's my life before and here's my life now, just so that you can see how his kind of values and principles that he talks about in the abstract actually translate to how you live on a day-to-day basis, where you're trying to be more in tune with what you really want, with showing up for the people who really matter for you, with doing these things that you think are significant with your 4,000 weeks.
Right. I'll be honest, like when I was reading, I didn't pick up on that. Like I didn't think about it. But now that we're talking about it and I'm reflecting, I think, as I said, you nailed it. The one thing that did bother me, I kind of feel like it's not a book for everyone. Like I feel like if you're struggling to get by and, you know, life is falling to pieces for you, there's something maybe elitist and a bit kind of like philosophical, waspy about it in some senses, like intellectual. And like that's great. And again, not taking away from the value, but I think it's important to keep that in mind. Like this isn't your guidebook to managing your time and to getting, can I swear? No, getting your stuff together.
Yeah.
Getting your shit together. Sorry.
You're right. Yes. I hadn't thought of that so much when I was reading it. But yes, if you're balancing, you know, several minimum wage jobs, or, you know, caring responsibilities and financial struggles, this book isn't the book to help you, because it won't necessarily even offer you comfort of, oh, well, at least you're trying really hard.
No, it won't. And like, I can't imagine somebody, let's say you're working like, say, 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs and you have kids and whatever, taking care of sick, aging parents. You're going to go sit and apply these rules where you're going to think about priorities and what matters and like how you want to spend your time. It's not relevant because you're in survival mode. It's just not relevant.
In that case, do you have a particular kind of person in mind who would benefit from reading this book?
It's a good question. Like, I mean, and I'm also curious to hear what you have to say, but I think it is a good book for copywriters and small business owners, because I think it is an opportunity to sit back and reflect and to get thoughtful about how you spend your time. And also, especially freelancers who are juggling potential opportunities and projects, to kind of think about, like, if you know, it's opportunity cost, right? Everything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. So I think it's an opportunity to say, like, how I want to spend my 4,000 weeks and like how I want to move my business and myself. So I do think that's who I would recommend it for. Small business owners, freelancers, copywriters. That would be my recommendation. But I'd love to hear from you, Sarah.
I think I agree with you. I would say if you're coming to this book and you're expecting or hoping to receive concrete advice about wake up at 5:30 a.m., then do this, then do that, this isn't the book for you. But if you have some sort of creative business and you're finding it a bit draining to manage, I think that this book is helpful for that, as long as you're a sort of philosophical person who can take ideas, take things and apply them. I think that you would find it helpful for both your business and maybe also your life as well, to be able to look at things through a slightly more critical eye and give yourself this, develop that muscle reflex of, is this worth my time? I'm hesitating to say this, but it's an idea that's been bumping around in my head. Again, with what I assume I know of Oliver Burkeman's life of becoming a father recently. It is kind of a masculine book in some ways, I found.
Interesting.
And because he talks about the value of not having 100% control over your time. And that the things that are really, from his point of view, worthwhile doing involve some kind of collaboration with another person or with other people. And collaboration by its very nature means giving up a degree of control, because you have to meet at a specific time or you have to work together, that kind of thing. So if you're striving for 100% autonomy of your time, you will be pretty lonely and you'll be limited in what you can achieve with that. And I think that's a really valuable insight, but it comes from, and I'm making horrendous gender stereotypes here, I'm sorry, but I feel like it comes from people who have less exposure to working with people who are kind of vulnerable in some way, like
Right.
children, the elderly, that kind of thing.
Women, but also women, like women, like generally we're vulnerable. We create spaces to be vulnerable in.
Yeah. And again, maybe it's me reading too much into it, but him explaining why you need to do this. I thought the explanation was interesting. I just hadn't felt like I needed that to be explained to me,
right.
Because I can see how I give up parts of my time to collaborate with other people and that I get riches back from it. So it's a nice reinforcement, I suppose, in that way. It was a nice little pat on the back, but I felt like I didn't necessarily need it. And it gave me the mental image of a man in a small living space with a young child, and the man's like kind of losing his mind because the kid is like taking 2 hours 40 minutes to eat a handful of peas, because they're like eating them one by one and chatting, and suddenly there's peas in their hair and their ears. That's one of the moments that you just have to take a deep breath and just live through without manipulating the present experience.
Yeah. And except, which is something else he touches on, that sometimes things take the time they take and there's no pushing it. And I really like that. Things take the time they take. The kid with the peas in the hair and eating its food, it's going to take the time it's going to take. And you can try push them and make them eat quicker, much more quickly, but it's not going to work. So.
Yes. Or also, I volunteer with the elderly, and sometimes the time it takes to walk 5 meters across the room, and then you get there and they're like, oh, but I left my cup on the table. And you're like, no, it's fine. I'll go back and get the cup. And they're like, no, I'll go and get it. And you think, oh my God. But things take the time they take. And in, you're just there on planet Earth using up your 4,000 weeks thinking, well, I hope that they're finding this a meaningful experience, that we're now crossing the room back to pick up this goddamn cup.
Right.
So it felt to me like Oliver Burkeman was experiencing these things for the first time, which is, I suppose, quite nice for him. But yeah, it's in a way it is a guidebook for, let's say, men over the age of like 28 of how to deal with increased life responsibilities.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And if you have a creative kind of business or you're some sort of freelancer as well, this book is for you. Not to criticize those people, just like I think I just want to make sure that we're helping the right kind of person, you know?
Right. No, but I'll be honest, like I'm not a male over the ages of 20, 28 with, new responsibilities, but I took stuff out of this book. So,
Yeah. Do you have anything that you would want to say that's still sticking with you about it, Nicole?
I don't know, I'll go over this. I said this, but I'll just say it again. Like something that really stuck with me, which like if you know me, if you've worked with me, I'm very much an ideas person, which is problematic because I don't often do much with the ideas, and then I'm always saying yes to things in my head, which I'm not, but it's a problem. And one of the things is you have to learn to say no to the things you do want to do, which for me, I find it very calming and also very, it's like permission to say no, which I liked. That would be my, and you?
Nice. He talks about the idea that actually our default state is leisure, and working is kind of an intrusion on our leisure time. And I thought that that's a nice flip. It's a nice way around to look at it, especially when you have a business and suddenly your working hours can go a bit crazy because you could theoretically be working anytime, all the time. And it's nice I found it a nice idea because also I like relaxing. I like doing not a lot. But also a reminder that there is value in rest, and it's okay to, even if you love your business, it's okay to want to contain that,
Right.
so that you can go back to doing what you do best, which is relaxing.
I remember that section, and it really resonated with me, kind of like the idea that we feel guilty, like if we're not doing something, like even if we're relaxing, we have to have permission to relax somehow.
Yes.
And I see that in my life. Like if it's a weekend and I'm just, relaxing on the couch, I feel guilty for not, doing laundry or cleaning up. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yes, it's I think it's a nice way of thinking about taking a step back, because in some ways, when you are lying on the sofa or whatever, then it can be a bit of a reflex to think, oh, well, if I've got time to do this, then I should do that. Or now that the laundry's finished, I need to hang it out or put it away or something. But it's a nice, I suppose it's kind of a circuit breaker in that idea of, oh, must move on to the next thing.
And I think, and this is like, maybe I'm doing what he does, but maybe this is for women. And I'll explain why, because again, I'm generalizing, so forgive me, everybody. But like a lot of times I feel, maybe particularly in marriages, like there's this obsession with like, you have to keep the house clean, these are very old, terrible ideas, which I don't subscribe to, but then I find myself being caught in these loops, of like, the house should be clean and it's on me. And like, even though my husband shares the bulk of the work of the house, but still there's this societal, very outdated, very gendered idea. And I feel like women need this permission to kind of like just relax. You don't need to always be doing something.
Yes. And actually that relaxation can be counted in the win column of just,
Right.
taking some time to really just do nothing.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's everything that really stuck with me about the book. So should we move on to our implementation points?
Sure. Maybe just one thing to say about the implementation points is he has, because mine won't make sense then. At the end of the book, I think he has this set of, I think, 5 reflection questions to kind of reflect on your life and to reflect on how you're using your time and to reflect on how to infuse, everyday life with meaning. So that's something that I wanted to mention before I get stuck into my implementation points. So as I said at the beginning, Sarah and I actually recorded this before, and then we decided to re-record. And so I changed one of my implementation points. And I've actually also started implementing one of them, which I won't report on now, but all I will say is it's beautiful and I really recommend it. But we'll talk about that in the next episode. So my 3 are, so first of all, I want to do the daily reflection questions every day as a kind of journal exercise, which I haven't been doing. It's a good opportunity to stop and to reflect and to think about how I'm using my time, especially as a freelancer and how someone growing a business.
Could you give an example of some of those questions that you're asking yourself and journaling about?
Now you have me on the spot. I haven't started using them. No, that's okay. I haven't started using them, but it's a good... So, for example, like, where in your life or your work are you currently pursuing comfort when what's called for is a little discomfort? Now, it's beautiful, right? Because we tend to shy on the side of comfort. We avoid discomfort. And so, like, I really want to think about this. To me, this question says, where can I push myself? Like, where in my life am I taking the easy road out? And like, where can I push myself? So it's an invitation to push yourself, which is beautiful, I think. So things like that. I won't go into too much detail because we'll reflect on it in the next episode. My second one, which it's not directly from the book, but it's kind of inspired by the book, is what I'm calling like a gratitude box. So I bought like a container, and every day, me and my family, we write down one thing from our day that we're grateful for or that made us happy. And for me, that's about, like it could be anything. It could be like the stupidest thing, like we saw a bird or, whatever, something, nice food, whatever. And it's beautiful because it's an opportunity to kind of like zoom out to like just kind of experience life and to kind of see that even if you had a bad day, that beautiful things are happening and that life has meaning, And then my third point, he talks about radical incrementalism and paying yourself first. So this is my new one. And what I want to do is I want to use this idea of doing things in small increments, but also paying myself first to try and start working on a book. So using like in small, fiction. And we'll see where that takes me.
Interesting.
What about you, Sarah?
Well, like you, since we talked about it last time, I have given it a thought and I've changed some of one of my implementation points too. So, like you, I'm going to go for point number 1, paying myself first with my time, because my approach up to now has tended to be, that I'll look at my week and say, okay, I've got this, and this in terms of client work coming up. And actually, and then I kind of fit other things in around the edges. And actually, I think it would be better for me, and it could potentially be more lucrative in the long run, to put my own priorities first, to designate them, put them on the calendar of when I'm going to do them, and then to do my client work after that and around that. So it's kind of, reverse approach to what I've been doing up to now. So, and my priorities are this podcast, growing this podcast with you, Nicole, growing our membership. And yay. I want to then do new client outreach, and I'm developing a new offer of service as well. So those are the things that I want to really put kind of front and center of my mental landscape. And one of the other, my second implementation point is he talks about, doing one task at a time. He's quite big on serializing things, and I can hop around and do multiple things at once, but I've noticed I only tend to do that when I have some level of discomfort about the tasks that I'm doing. So it's what he would call, manipulating your experience of the present. So I don't know if it'll work for me or not, but I'm curious to see what happens when I try and break that pattern of having, 15 tabs open on one screen, 22 on the other, and I'm just kind of bouncing around them and, doing things and shooting off an email. So I don't know if it'll if it'll really work for me. But I think if I'm doing that because I'm feeling some level of anxiety, it would be interesting to look at the anxiety first and then do the tasks. Yeah.
And like, besides that, do you have a plan for how to execute it? Like maybe, making sure that no tabs open, or just looking at the anxiety?
I think that's a good question. I think that for me, I'll do it because it's a habit that I kind of slip into, again, as I say, when I feel some kind of anxiety. So I think probably the first step for me will be to actually stop doing everything and to give myself some space to think, why do I feel this way? Why am I uncomfortable to committing to, for example, sending this email or sending off, this month's tax return? So think about the emotion first, and then of the, the multiple tabs open and the many tasks going on, then to itemize those and work through them one by one. So it will be quite a different way of working for me, because I have to say, this kind of bouncing around, it must be scratching some kind of itch for me. And I wonder if there's a better way to do it.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, we will see. So yeah, what have I said then? Paying myself first in time, serializing my tasks, and then I think that my last one will probably be as you said, Nicole, you referenced the question of the uncomfortable enlargement, and I'm very curious about that, but I'm still struggling of a way to define it and how I'll sort of translate that into reality, because I think that there are spaces, certainly in my business, where I choose to stay in the small, comfortable place rather than stepping into the slightly bigger, uncomfortable place. And I think it's a very interesting idea. I'm just grappling with it.
So I don't know if this is okay to reference another book in a podcast episode about a specific book, but I'm going to anyway.
Oh, I love getting meta. Do it.
So I'm a huge fan of Matthew Dix. I've mentioned him twice already. And I just finished one of his books, his newest book called Someday is Today, which I mentioned earlier. And he has this whole thing about saying yes. So like, to projects that come his way, to things in life that make him feel uncomfortable, where he'd usually have some resistance, he says yes. And I won't spoil the book for you because it's a good read. But he talks about how in his life he said yes to something that he was not qualified for, that like a project that a friend of his asked him to do with him, and he did it. And like, basically it changed the course of his life. Like, I know it sounds like kind of a Hallmark story, and it sounds like the most unlikely story. But it's a good read. And also, to me, it's like, this is about the uncomfortable enlargement, about how when we lean into the things that make us uncomfortable, like, we don't know where it's going to go. And I don't know, for me, that makes me feel hopeful, especially when I feel stuck and, too comfortable, because we never grow from comfort. So that's just my little thought on that.
It's interesting because that's kind of the opposite of the Oliver Burkeman thing, because he's all about saying no.
Right.
So when to say yes, when to say no. I'm still pursuing my kind of business mentorship coaching, which, I mean, it was uncomfortable for me right off the bat. So maybe that'll be a question or an angle that I tackle through that, of perhaps showing up in different spaces, or being able to talk about myself a bit more and about my work, because I have big blocks around that.
Can I up the ante for you?
Mm-hmm.
Make it a bit more complicated. Once a week, you commit to doing something that makes you uncomfortable. Once a week, in your personal life, in your business. Once a week. Could be something small, something big. Once a week.
Okay, and it's just about putting on those jeans that are just a little bit too tight.
Exactly, you see?
Okay.
That's
a good, I like that. I will try and do that then, once a week, something that makes me feel slightly uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
So yeah, slightly uncomfortable. Yeah. Did I say comfortable? Uncomfortable. Anyway.
No, you said slightly uncomfortable. So I'm like, no, uncomfortable, not slightly. Uncomfortable.
Okay, something that makes me feel uncomfortable. Full stop. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Right.
Membership time.
with that said, I think it is time to take a sip of your favorite drink and find out all the things that we have going on in the Tried It podcast membership.
Which is awesome, I think. And if you enjoyed our podcast, you're going to love our membership because it's more of this, except better, I think. So basically every week you get an email with, exercises and prompts and ideas on how to grow your business through the eyes of the world's greatest copywriters and business people.
So Nicole or I send out an email to our members once a week with thoughts and exercises based on the books that we've been reading. And you'll have a copywriting philosophical digest plus an exercise to do, which you can do on the day, or you star it and save it. And the idea is that it's something quick and easy that you can do 13 minutes or less that will help you develop your copywriting skills. So we're inspired by the things that we read or the things that we're doing in our own work, and we help you to invest and grow your own skills. So if you're a copywriter who's been writing for a little bit and you can see that you've improved, but you're not quite sure where to go from here, the newsletter and membership is a way for you to have that path kind of laid out for you so that you can keep practicing and putting one step in front of the other and getting better at your own business. So there's the weekly email, which is important, but it's not everything. It's not the entire membership, because members also get secret podcast episodes exclusive to members only, where Nicole and I take more of a broad approach, talking about our books and things that we're reading in our work. And members can vote on one of the books that we will be looking at together. So if you have a copywriting book on your shelf that you bought and that you haven't been, you haven't had the time to read, you can contact us and have a vote. And then we will, if it gets enough votes, it'll form 2 of our episodes of the season.
Yeah, and like what I can say is, and this is totally biased because I'm one of the co-creators of this membership, but I've been writing for over 10 years, and this is the membership I wish I had when I started writing. That's what I'll say. So it's a great place to grow and to really hone your craft as a writer and as a copywriter and as a business owner.
Definitely. And the podcast we've run in seasons so that we have the time to really think about the books and our implementation points. Membership all year round, baby. You'll get that email once a week across the whole year. So we would love to see you in the member zone. The link is below in the show notes, and you can also find more details on the website, which also linked in the show notes. So with that said, oh, no, you go ahead.
I should say one more thing. And even if you don't want to join the membership, we still love you. And just, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts or feedback or anything about the podcast, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, we'd love it. You can drop us a message, drop us an email, or reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'd love to know your thoughts. Are you a 28-year-old man struggling with increased responsibilities who found some value from this book? Would genuinely reach out. Please do. Would be great to hear from you. So with that said, in the next episode, we're going to be following up on our implementation points. And so if you subscribe to the podcast, you'll have that hit your feed as soon as it's released. So with all of that said, I think that is bye from me, Sarah.
And from me, Nicole.
Take care and see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.